And now, this is our children's moment. We've got a lesson for the kids. And for our lesson today, I wanted to talk to you about jobs. Do you have a job? Well, if you're a kid, you probably said, no way, I'm not old enough to have a job. I'm not just talking about the kind of job like grown-ups have, like where you go to your work and you get paid. I'm talking about things that you have to do, like responsibilities that you've got to do that somebody has assigned you to do, or they've called you to do it. Like maybe chores. Do you have chores around the house? Well, mom or dad have called you, that means they've assigned you, to do certain jobs around the house to help out. I know when I was younger, I had to help with the dishes and clean the bathrooms. Those were some of my jobs. Did you know in the Bible, God gives us jobs too? God calls us to all kinds of different things. He tells us the things that he wants us to do. He's calling us to all of these things. But in the Bible, Jesus said there is one thing that is the most important thing of all of the jobs that God has given you. Make sure you follow this one thing that he's calling you to do. Why don't you look it up and read it with me? I'm in the Bible, the book of Mark, chapter 12, verse 30. Mark 12:30 says this: love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. Love him with all your mind and with all your strength. Sometimes it can be easy to do things that we've been called to do because sometimes it's fun for us to do, or we get a reward afterwards. But there are some jobs that we're called to do that just aren't very fun. Like at home, can you think of a chore that you've been called to do? Mom or dad has called you to do it, but you really don't want to do it. I'm sure there are lots that you can think of right now. There was somebody in the Bible who God gave a very specific job to. And this person in the Bible didn't want to do it. Do you know who I'm talking about? It's Jonah. I'm going to read you the story of Jonah from the Jesus Storybook Bible published by Zondervan Kids. And let's find out what happened when Jonah didn't do what God had called him to do. God had a job for Jonah, but Jonah didn't want it. Go to Nineveh, God said, and tell your worst enemies that I love them. No, said Jonah, those are bad people doing bad things. Exactly, said God. They have run far away from me, but I can't stop loving them. I will give them a new start. I will forgive them. No, said Jonah, they don't deserve it. I'll run away, Jonah said to himself, far away, so far away God won't be able to find me. And then I won't have to do what God says. It's a good plan, he said, because as far as he knew, it was a good plan. But of course, it was not a good plan at all. It was a silly plan. Because you can't run away from God. He will always come and find you. Jonah went ahead with his not very good plan. One ticket to not Nineveh, please, he said, and boarded a boat sailing in the very opposite direction of Nineveh. Well, it wasn't long before a fierce wind blew and the boat started to lurch and pitch and roll. Everyone started turning green. Jonah sat bolt upright in his bed. You see, the first thing that went wrong with Jonah's not very good plan was that God sent a big storm after him. The sailors couldn't sail their ship properly. We're sinking, they screamed, and started throwing everything overboard, suitcases, food, whatever they could find. By now, Jonah knew that the storm was his fault. Throw me in instead, he shouted to the sailors, and the storm will stop. The sailors weren't sure. It's the only way you can be saved, Jonah cried. And so, 1, 2, 3, splash! No sooner had Jonah hit the water than the waves grew calm. The wind died down, and the storm stopped. Just then, when Jonah thought it was all over, when he was sure he was going to drown, God sent a big fish to rescue him. The fish swallowed Jonah whole with one big gulp. Jonah must have thought he died. It was so dark in there, like a tomb. But then he smelled the rotting food and felt the slimy seaweed and knew he wasn't dead. He was in the belly of the fish. Sitting there in darkness for 3 whole days, Jonah had plenty of time to think. Pretty soon, he realized his plan was, well, a very silly plan indeed. He was sorry for running away. He prayed to God from inside the great fish and asked God to forgive him. After 3 days, the fish spat Jonah safely onto a sandy beach. Just then, Jonah heard someone calling his name. "Go to Nineveh," God said. And this time, Jonah said, "Yes!" He went straight to Nineveh and told everyone God's wonderful message. "Even though you've run far away from God, he can't stop loving you," Jonah told them. "Run to him so he can forgive you." The people of Nineveh listened to Jonah, and they started loving God. They learned to do what God said and to stop running away from him, just like Jonah. Jonah really didn't want to do what God had called him to do, just like sometimes when we have jobs that we really don't want to do. But if Jonah hadn't done what God called him to do, then the people of Nineveh would have suffered, and that wouldn't have been very fair. Sometimes when we think that we know better than whoever's giving us the job, like Jonah thought that he knew better than God. He thought it wasn't a very good idea. But is there anyone who knows better than God? No. Sometimes when we think we know better, we actually don't. And there's a reason why God wanted Jonah to go. So this week, I want you to think if there is something that God is calling you to do, something that God's wanting you to do, but you might not want to do it. Maybe because you're scared, or because you think it's just not a very good idea, or maybe you just don't want to do it. If there's something that God is wanting you to do, then step out of your comfort zone this week and give it a try. You never know. Something great might come out in the end. Have a great week. I'll see you again soon.